joined us, who is the new interim internal auditor. And
good morning, everyone.
We'll hear more from Colin a bit later. The meeting is being recorded, so everybody is aware of that. And we've got Sarah and Luann have joined us for the meeting as well. So welcome to everybody. Can I ask Derek to do the roll call first?
Thank you for that, Chair. I'll just run through it in a quick manner. I will start with the voting members so we can ensure we're correct. John Tomlinson, you are here and have been speaking. Councillor Al Samurai.
Present.
Councillor Bell.
Present.
Luann Grugion.
Hi, present.
That's fine. Thereafter, I'll just run through some of the other attendees. Alex Stephen.
Yeah, I'm here.
Colin Harvey.
Here.
Jean Stewart Coxon.
Yeah.
Kundai Sinclair from Legal.
Here.
Martin Allen.
Here.
Sandra MacLeod.
Here.
And also joining us today, Councillor Duncan.
Here, and thank you for letting me come along.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. It's 6 months since the last committee, but relevant items have been going to the IJB. So I'd like to thank the Chief Officer and the Chief Finance Officer for, and the various authors, in fact, for getting us to the stage where we can restart the committee, but noting that the relevant or significant business has been continuing through the IJB. So first item of business is any declarations of interest. Do we have any? No. Okay, I see no indications for that. Next is determination of exempt business, which we don't have any on the on the agenda today. So if we can note that there are no exempt items, which takes us to item 3, which is the minute of that last meeting in February 2020. Can I just take it for accuracy first? So this is pages 5 to 10 of the pack. So any points of accuracy in relation to page 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. Okay, I don't see anything there or anything in the meeting chat, so we'll take that as an accurate record. So any matters arising from this? Does anybody have anything they would like to raise? Okay, Alex?
Yeah, in relation to item 13, to request the Chief Officer to investigate NHS Grampian assurance activities and report and present these to a report at a committee meeting on the 28th of April. Obviously, we didn't have that meeting on the 28th of April. Colin Harvey has been in touch with NHS Grampian around about assurances from their internal audit function, and has considered that within his report. And the bit about providing a report to the committee on assurance activities that was taken to the IJB in April or in May. I just highlighting these two issues.
Okay, thank you. Any other points? Okay, I would just like to highlight that and one of our duties is to receive finance updates, and so I'd just like it minuted that has been done through the IJB, and so as a committee and as board members we can be satisfied that scrutiny has taken place over recent months. Okay, so if we can move on from the minute. Thank you. Alex, your hand's still up, just in case. Thanks. So if we can go on to the business planner, which is at page 11. You'll see that the items here have been left on as being scheduled for April, June and August. So as committee members, we can see what was due, and then we can check off what has actually happened and then what's going to come forward. So it's helpful that's there, and obviously that will be updated for the next committee. So I have one item on this, but I'll open it up to others first if there's anything anybody wants to raise. Okay, I don't see any hands or notes in the chat. So the one item I had relates to, in fact, the second item on there, which mentions the directions planner. And in fact, that comes up at a later report, which indicates that there will be something coming to our next committee on that. So I've been through every single item of that, and all of them are either on today, have been handled by the IJB, or are scheduled for September. So I think with that, we bring all of our business planning up to date. Everybody content with that on the business planner? Okay, thanks very much. So if we can go on to the next item, which is the strategic risk register. And so I'll bring Martin in, and we've got the replacement paper that was issued for this. So probably like you, I've got to go out of this paper and find another one, which might take me a minute or two. But Martin, can you introduce the paper for us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the strategic risk register was submitted to the IJB earlier this month. So there were various comments made from members at the IJB meeting, specifically in relation to risk 6, which is the reputational damage risk. So IJB members wanted a bit more detail about how the IJB could receive comments or feedback from community groups, for example, on its strategic proposal and activities. So the version of the risk register that has been circulated as an additional circulation outlines some details in this regard. So I think it's an opportunity for the committee to have a look at that and make comments specifically in relation to risk 6, but also the other risks as well. Just wanted to point out that the risk rating for risk 6 on page 4 should read high and not medium, so apologies for that. It's proposed that there's going to be an IJB workshop scheduled for the 20th of October, which will provide members of the IJB with the opportunity to discuss the strategic risks in a bit more detail. And I'm happy to take any questions on the report or the risk register. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Can I open it up for questions and comments, please? Philip?
Thank you. So Martin, you and I were going to have a chat offline about how the risk register should be laid out, and we haven't actually managed to do that yet, have we? Because I do have concerns. I really don't care it's the way National Health do it, or whatever, or whoever. It's very hard to actually be able to look at the risks, to determine with the function of the impact, consequence, likelihood, what the risk is, how you mitigate against that risk. It's I for one just don't, I don't get this at all. So we really do need to talk about it. I feel it is easily resolved, and it would make a lot more sense actually.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Bell, I'm happy to arrange that session. Apologies for not getting it done before this committee, but I'll make that a priority so that we can have that opportunity to have the chat.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I'm noting that we have a workshop in October, so if there's anything from that can be considered with a bit more time and space, presumably that would be the time to do that. Any other?
Yeah, but could I possibly say though, John, that the workshop, to my mind, would be to review the risks that you have, and so if you haven't got them actually laid out in a format to allow you to do that, it really will detract from the efficiency of that workshop.
Yes, I'm aware that there's other, I suppose, other parties using this methodology. So anything we want to do to amend it might have a knock-on effect. But Martin, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I was just thinking that maybe formatting is maybe not my strong point, but I will rely on my colleagues who do have better skills in that in those areas, and maybe invite one or two along to the meeting as well, so we can really hopefully come to some agreement there.
And I could actually send you an example that the Aberdeen Science Centre have. So you know, just to give you the heads up, as it were.
Yeah, happy to look at that.
Okay, thanks. If you can do that, and so Martin, if you can arrange that fairly soon with Councillor Bell, that would be helpful. Councillor Samurai.
Thanks, Chair. I was actually going to thank Mr. Allen for separating out the risks. That was one of the things that we raised at the IJB, and that they weren't all trailing into one risk, because I felt that was the difficult aspect of actually reading the document. But I do have a question, if you can just bear with me while I jump between documents. It is on page 7 of the pack. It's to do with risk 2. Apologies while I find the page. Mm-hmm. It's around about the mitigating actions, and I wanted to ask how we were getting on with the options to close any shortfall, whether or not that had been progressed any further since it was last discussed. And I wondered if I could have some indication also if the IJB has received any more information from the Scottish Government regarding funding.
Alex, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, so I mean, the situation is there hasn't really been any movement since the last conversation that we had at the IJB. I haven't had any more information from the Scottish Government, although I have provided them with information, and they're obviously assessing that information as it sits at the moment. As I talked about in the IJB, there was £50 million of additional money that was put into the IJBs. 25 million of that's been distributed based on the GAE and NRAC share, and we're waiting for confirmation on how the other 25 million will be moved forward. In regard to the options, you know, we've got some high-level options. We're working our way through these. A number of these are linked to the Operation Home First work that we're doing, and if we have a shortfall, once the confirmation of the funding is agreed, then we'll come back to the IJB with more information. So it's still the same situation, I'm afraid, Councillor Samurai, as it was when we last reported to the IJB.
Okay,
thanks, Mr. Stephen.
Did you want to come back on that or not?
No, I'm satisfied with the response from Mr. Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you. Luann?
Thanks, John. I've got a number of comments that are probably more just updates on, you know, how things have progressed. But I'm not suggesting that I go through all of that today, because every time I look at it, there's another thing I think, oh, we could add this in. But I could maybe email Martin out with the meeting, because they're just small details. But it did get me thinking that we keep adding things to this, and I wonder if there's a job in just going through and removing any details that are older, so that it helps us sort of, you know, helps us see the wood from the trees, as it were. So I wonder if there's just an exercise to go through it and just remove anything that was a comment or a control or something that was put in place at the start, so that we're just dealing with the fresh, up-to-date position. And it may help with some of the comments that Councillor Bell was making just about the usefulness of the document. So that's just a suggestion. I think there's golden threads that probably could be highlighted a bit more. So what doesn't come through very strongly in this version is the importance of engagement with community members and co-production in a number of the different risk areas, which will be one of our key mitigating actions. And I wonder if we could look at the workshop and just use the workshop to look at, are the titles, are the risk summaries still the correct headings? And I've got a question about risk 8, which is about the IJB does not maximise the opportunities offered by locality working. Do we need to reframe that? That's more around, it's not just locality working, but it's locality engagement. So, and I do note, Martin, that you've put in the comments about legs and stuff in the body of it, but I wonder if it should feature more in the overarching risks. But that would be my suggestion for the workshop, that we look at that and we maybe just try and take out some of the narrative that's maybe been there for a while.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Happy to be speaking with the risk owners, the individual risk owners for these 10 risks, to kind of suggest that they do that kind of housekeeping, I suppose, making sure that everything's up to date, so that the strategic risk register can be as up to date as possible and meaningful as possible ahead of every meeting, but also, I suppose, ahead of the workshop in October as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Samurai.
Apologies, I forgot to put my hand down.
Okay, that's fine. So any other comments? So you'll take on board what Luann's just raised then, Martin, ahead of October.
Yes, and if there were any more specific questions that you do have, Luann, just send them through and we'll have a look at them.
Yeah, I'll do that, Martin.
So just in, Alex, do you want to come in before you?
Yeah, I just to sort of highlight that, I think the suggestions that are being made around about, some of them are looking quite wordy now because we just keep on adding bits into them, and some of that text is older and that control's already in there. Also take on board Councillor Bell's point about, understanding, I suppose, how we got to the place that we got to in terms of what the risk rating is, so on. So that's maybe something that can be picked up. The format itself is a format that was undertaken by the Good Governance Institute when we first started the IJB, and whilst there could be some tweaks to the format, I would be keen to try and keep the format as much within that sort of way as we can. But if there are additions that need to be added, then have a look at that. Just because we invested a lot of time and effort with the Good Governance Institute in terms of setting up some of this stuff, and I wouldn't want it just to be passed away. So I think there is just something about tidying some of this stuff up a little bit, and certainly the workshop will help with that.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes. Sarah, would you like to comment?
Yes, thanks very much, John.
Sorry, Councillor
No, Sarah's fine. It occurs to me that the council use a kind of grid to indicate unmitigated risk and then mitigated risk. And I think maybe that's what Councillor Bell's thinking about when he's talking about it's difficult to tell the impact of the mitigated and unmitigated risk. And there's lots of examples of that on the council risk registers. So it might be worth having a word with Martin Murchie to get that grid. It also occurs to me that it might be worth Luann, John and I meeting with Martin and Alex to discuss the workshop format and to make sure that there's information issued in advance. It'll be a very difficult workshop to make much progress on, I think, if people haven't seen the papers beforehand. So I'd be happy to do that if we can find a time that fits in with Martin and Alex.
Okay, Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So just to come out very quickly, I'll send a copy of this of the format that I think you'll find quite useful, and I'll send it to Sarah, to Luann, to Alex, to John, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And if you think I'm talking absolute tosh, fine.
Okay. So I think that's all the contributions. I think that's actually been quite helpful because this issue has been bouncing about among some of the conversations for a while. and we do need to bring it to a head so that we're all content and can be assured on this. So the piece of work will be helpful. I mean, my understanding of this is that this format is a bit different from some others that I've seen, and it attempts to do a few things like risk tolerance in with mitigation, in with levels of risk, and it probably is a question of us understanding clearly how those different elements of the register work, so I think the work between now that, like Councillor Duncan suggested, will be helpful as well, and then Councillor Bell meeting with Martin and sharing that information, and that's all very positive. The one thing I wanted to raise on this is that on page 4, we've got 3 risks that have been have a change in them. So the risk 2, financial failure, it goes to very high for the reasons that have been well articulated previously at the IJB. The relationships with partners has gone down to low, and I think the COVID experience has demonstrated how strong those relationships are, so that seems justified to me. The reputational damage one, going from medium to high, reflects these issues about our relationship with the public. It's probably more about perception that might come in the uncertainty, as opposed to any particular concerns of how we're operating. So those are 3 changes, and I think we just need to record that we've seen those changes and that we're content with them. I'm going to ask that question to make sure people are, and then we can note the additional text that Martin has referred to under risk 6 in relation to engagement with the public and with localities, and that can be reflected on further at the workshop. So on that basis, are we content to what we're asked for in terms of the recommendations, where we're noting this revised risk register with those changes, and then with the points that have been raised to be taken on board ahead of the workshop? Is everybody content with that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Can we go on to item 6 then? And I think Martin, this is your report as well. Oops, I'm going to have to come out of that set of papers and go to the other one. Could you just introduce the report, Martin, while we're getting our papers sorted? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the Board Assurance and Escalation Framework, the BAEF, describes the framework that the IJB and supports its visions, values and principles. I suppose a key element of the assurance framework is the risk management system, which contributes significantly to board assurance on key risks to the objectives. The appendices to the framework illustrate the landscape in which the IJB operates. So within those appendices, you're talking about the committee structure in terms of reference, the risk assessment system, the risk escalation process, the clinical and care governance framework, and how the IJB's cycle of business works. The BAEF was formally approved by the IJB back in March 2016. This committee last reviewed it in February 2019. Since then, a review of the framework has been undertaken, and the revised version is attached as the appendix to this report. So I would say that largely the content of the framework remains the same after the revisions, and the key changes being changes made to governance arrangements and reporting as approved by the IJB as part of its scheme of governance processes. So, for example, that's the changing to committee remits and names, etc. There was also an internal audit undertaken in relation to the board's risk management processes done by Aberdeen City Council's internal audit function. So the implementation and recommendations, the implementation of recommendations arising from that audit have been undertaken and are reflected in the framework. And apart from that, there are general housekeeping changes made throughout the document. We referenced in the last item about the Good Governance Institute. So when the IJB and the partnership were working with the Institute back at the beginning of integration, There was kind of recommendations about the template for the strategic risk register, as well as the production of this framework. It is proposed that the framework continue to be reviewed on an annual basis, and I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Can I open it up for questions? Okay, Luann?
Thanks. I suppose our first question is, should we be considering the COVID context when thinking about this at the moment? Because I think when we look at our risk appetite, for example, and looking at, we have a no or minimal risk to our staff and clients. That's actually not the case during a pandemic. So we're balancing risks, with things like access to services that normally would be there are not there because we're managing a pandemic. So if we're thinking about the COVID situation, I think I would suggest that there's a number of changes or additions that we would want to put in the document. So that's my first question, Martin.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm just wondering if some kind of additional wording in relation to, I suppose from a governance point of view, continuing to have the governance arrangements in place, so that if we have to respond to various issues around a pandemic, then the governance of the IJB can continue, but maybe a reference to the pandemic and how we would then operate the governance processes could be added into the framework.
Okay, does that meet what you're looking at, Luann?
Yeah, I suppose I was just, when I read the risk appetite, well, maybe my question maybe is, when we review, or do we review our risk appetite in the current context, and have we got a plan for when we review that? Because it's due to be done annually. I'm sorry, it's maybe in the planner and I've missed it, because it just doesn't, what's written just now doesn't reflect the balance of risks that we're taking on that the partnership are taking on a daily basis around managing COVID.
Alex, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I did. I think one of the difficulties here is that, this document's been getting updated for some time, and it was supposed to come to a previous version or a previous meeting around about this. So it probably doesn't reflect so much around about COVID that's actually happened as it sits at the moment. So what we're kind of doing here is seeking approval for the information that had been done previously. Now, granted, the risks and the risk appetite statement are going to move. I understand that this one incorporates the most recent change to the risk appetite statement that was made. And I guess what we're now looking at is, what does this mean going forward? So I completely get what you're saying, and there is maybe a case about having another look at this. But what we're trying to do is just to get us up to date, and then I guess the looking at this in relation to COVID, I think, could come over the next few months.
Okay, Sarah? Sorry, Councillor Duncan.
I think we obviously have to take account of COVID, but what COVID means is we're working in a higher risk environment, but does that necessarily change our tolerance of risk? So we're accepting that there's going to be greater efforts taken to avoid harm. And I think there's lots of examples of that with the COVID hubs near me, green and red streams, the Operation Home First to keep people out of hospitals. So I'm personally not convinced that our appetite has changed. I think we need to be more sighted on the greater risk, the greater mitigations that are needed to deal in a higher risk situation. That's just something I'm throwing out there for you to consider.
Okay, Luann, did you have any further comment on that?
I don't know what the answer is. I think this is a fair document that would reflect standard business, but it's just that it feels it doesn't align with the present circumstances we're in. Maybe there's just something that needs to be added, like a statement on managing managing our risk appetite and our escalation processes within the context of a pandemic. There's additional, as Sarah said, additional areas of assurance that we would look for. Because I was on reading it, I'm thinking, we're looking at, there's a Grampian Care Home Assurance Group, which is meeting that didn't exist before. We are looking for additional assurance from public health in relation to how the testing programme's going. So there's also an ethical advice and support group that the partnership can access to ensure that decisions that are being made are ethically sound in the context of a pandemic. So maybe a statement that gets added or something to reflect the reality of what we're living in for now and for the foreseeable future.
Okay, yes, thank you. Councillor Bell, is your question on this issue about COVID?
Yeah. Yes, it is actually. Thank you, Chair. So Councillor Duncan, actually, she's hit the nail right on the head. In this environment, this COVID environment, look for other mitigations. That's exactly what you do, and that's what the risk register will actually throw right in your face, is what you've got to do. So your risk tolerance is the same, it's always the same, but you put in more mitigations to ensure you maintain that level of risk tolerance. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah. And I think, well, my understanding would be that we have this workshop coming up and that we will be reviewing the risks at that point, plus the mitigations. And certainly when we've been talking about the reputational one, it was in this context of it being more complex and uncertain. And therefore we were revising the existing risk in light of that. So, but it's a very helpful point that you raised, Luann, so that can we agree that the paper itself just makes reference to the COVID situation, but that we'll be reviewing this at the workshop in terms of the risk register, in the sense of the mitigations and the level of risk. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, I just see Luann, your hand up. You have something else?
I do. I'm happy with that, John. Thank you. The other point I wanted to make was just that reading it again, this document's quite inward looking to the IJB, and I wonder if in some of the diagrams there's a two-way assurance process. So we are seeking assurance from other partners such as NHS Grampian, and I'll use Test and Protect as an example. But so the diagram, I think it's on page 78 of the pack, that I think there needs to be lines going both ways. So it's not just the IJB assuring NHS Grampian. We should be looking, or we are looking for NHS Grampian to provide assurance to us on certain aspects. So there's just something about the document reflecting that sometimes the IJB is seeking assurance. It's not just the IJB providing it to other partners, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Martin, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful comments. Happy to look at that kind of two-way assurance.
Okay, thank you. Certainly that's been a theme, I think, in terms of the joint working and what the interfaces are in like you're saying, Luann, sort of two-way and needing to be assured further upstream, if you like. So that's helpful. Thank you. Okay. Sandra, would you like to come in?
Hi, yeah, just really a comment. The diagram on page 78 that Luann's referring to, that diagram was just to show, I think, the placement of all the committees and which ones reported into which committee, as opposed to who reports and seeks assurance. I would suggest that instead of, and that gives a line of sight about how it was more about the schematic of how everything sits together, because there was quite a lot of confusion at the start about, for example, adult support and protection, how COG fits in, how we fit in with NHS and how we fit in. So that diagram there in 78 is more determining where we fit within the system. I take on board what Luann's suggesting about how we give assurance, and would wonder whether the diagrammatical format from the Audit Scotland report in 2018 has a really good overarching diagram about where the IJB sits in levels with the NHS and with council, and maybe that would be a supplementary that might show it better. But this one I don't think is intended to show the assurance lines, I think it's intended to show how it's the picture as to, so you can follow the route, if you like, as to where everything's going.
Okay, thank you for that. So is that something that you can take a look at then, Martin, with Sandra, and maybe incorporate that?
Yeah, as an additional appendix, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other points, questions? Okay, I just had one, and that's in relation to risk again. And I just wanted to cross-reference that in a later report, there is mention of do we need to do something in addition in terms of a risk management policy, and actually our policy is incorporated in this document as it is. So it's just to refer to that, so that when we come to that item later in the agenda, we've seen that this is our existing risk management policy, and as I understand it, there isn't anything else that we're looking to do. Just maybe looking to Martin and Alex to confirm that.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. That the policy, the risk management policy, is contained within this framework.
Okay, thank you, and we'll confirm that later on at one of the later items on the agenda. Okay, thank you. Sandra, you wanted to come back in?
Sorry, legacy hand.
Okay, right. Okay, so thanks very much for that. Again, that's been, I think, a very helpful discussion around that. Can I just check what happens to these points that are being raised between Derek in terms of the minute and then the report author, just to make sure we capture everything? Derek and Martin, can you confirm for me what's going to be happening there?
Well, I've been scribbling down notes, Chair. I'll certainly be amending the framework as well as the risk register in relation to the last two items, and I'll double check with the decision sheet that comes out from Derek, and make sure if I've got any queries or he's got any queries, then we can sort that out. But we'll definitely action all the points.
Okay, thank you very much.
In addition, Chair, we would probably just include an additional recommendation that the comments and feedback be introduced into the document.
Okay, that's helpful then. So going to the recommendations, which is page 41, we're asked to approve the revised framework, and we need to incorporate that comment, Derek, in terms of the revised framework with the discussion that's taken place and the points that have been raised. And then the other recommendation is noting that this will be reviewed annually. And I think I'm just mindful of the workload of officers. So although there's been a delay time-wise in terms of bringing this to us, I'm happy that it's 12 months before the committee get this again, rather than doing it at the start of the financial year. Are we content with that as a committee? Okay, yeah, thank you very much then. If we can go on to item 7, which starts at page 83 of the pack. So this is the review of duties in the year-end report, and this shows how we fulfilled the duties in 1920 and how they're to be fulfilled in the current year. So I'd like to thank Alex for getting us to this point. It's nice and simple the way it's laid out, but I know it's taken a bit of doing and throwing to get there. So thank you very much for that. Do you want to just introduce the report, Alex?
I will do, Chair, and I think you've probably introduced it for me, so thanks very much for that. We've got in here, yeah, basically this is a format. I have changed the format slightly to reflect the new terms of reference, and I've consolidated some of the bits within there. And I think you can see when you go through there, we've either taken reports on most of the items where we've had to, or we've not taken reports because it's something that just happens as and when required. So, you know, I think we can take some assurance from that in relation to what we've done. And going forward into next year or this financial year, obviously we've included the IJB meetings where we took some of the governance stuff to, in the absence of the RAP committee, just to allow, just to show that's actually happened as well. And I think yeah, we made good progress through in terms of keeping the assurance function going. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Alex. Can I open that up then for questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any there. I have one point to raise on this, and that's to do with, I'll get the page number. I think it's in the 2021, page 95, item of duty 10 in relation to hosted services. So there's nothing indicated there explicitly as to when that would come to us as a committee, but it is something for us to do to support the IJB in this. So last year we had an exercise which examined this, and we're looking to do something similar again this year. So I'm assuming that Alex will come back to the chair, Councillor Duncan, and this committee will be informed how that will be fulfilled. Alex?
Yeah, just to say that was discussed at the IJB pre-agenda meeting earlier this week, and Sandra advised the meeting that the chief officers were reviewing the hosted services governance and the information that would come out as a result of what was done last year, and that someone will be coming back, but we don't have a date as it sits at the moment, but we've not lost sight of it.
Excellent, that's good. And I think with that shows us as a committee we've looked at the whole range of this, and our officers have been mindful of bringing forward. So that's really helpful. Luann?
Thanks. So my first one is a really daft lassie question, so I'll just go for it, which is about the finance bit, and it says page 97, act as a focus for value for money, and it's described what we do as reactive, and I haven't got the sheet up in front of me, but it says we're reactive, and I suppose my instinct is, how do we shift from reactive to proactive, and is there anything more we can be doing to be proactive around this committee being used to ensure that we are a value for money, we are doing a value for money approach to all our spend? Big question, I know.
So yeah, I normally get this question from the external auditors, but it's the first time I've had it from from a committee member before, and I normally struggle with it, to be honest with you, and I do have to go to the external auditors as well. But I think what we rely on around about this is the information on the processes that we put in place as an IJB. So a lot of the processes, like the tendering processes that we go through, the controls that are in place around about procurement and spend, all act as a focus for value for money for the organisation. In terms of what my view is on what that's there, is that I feel that if the IJB or the Risk and Audit Committee had identified something where they weren't convinced that the IJB was receiving value for money, then I think you could instruct an investigation and either request myself or some of the other officers within the IJB to go and bring back a further report to ensure that the value for money was being achieved through that. So I think and you'll have seen that in terms of the external auditor report that came forward as well. They always have a bit on value for money, and they place a certain reliance on these processes and being in place too. So I think what my feeling would be is that if you did see something or something had come up and you were questioning, is that value for money, then we would be undertaking an investigation on that basis. But the controls provide us with the protection that the things that we are doing are generating value for money.
So I wonder if just that summary doesn't really reflect, it just reads in a negative way, and actually what you've described is that we are actually proactive, and the processes for that are embedded. That would be my thinking on reading that. It doesn't really reflect what's in place.
I'll be happy to make that change.
Thank you. And I've got a second question, which is just on page 97. It refers to Operation Home First in the comments around the looking at transformation activity. And I just wanted to check, is that so? That's in addition to the other areas that we would look at. Is that right? And it also got me thinking, would there be wider initiatives that currently haven't come? So I'm thinking of like ADP, new initiatives that might be looked at by this committee in terms of transformation and innovation.
So, sorry, Luann, could you give me the page reference? I'm struggling to see it.
Page 97, I think. I'll go and check.
I couldn't see it on page 97.
Oh, 95. No, 95, sorry.
Right.
It's
number 6.
So Sandra, I think, wants to comment on this one. So I'll let Sandra. So I can see it on 95. It's about the supporting the. What is it? No, 95. Yeah.
95. I'm sorry. Yes.
Number 6, 95. Review transformation and service quality initiatives. Monitor the transformation programme and consider mainstreaming where appropriate.
Do you want Sandra to come in?
Yeah, I'll let Sandra take that one.
So I suppose recall the paper that we had at IJB previously, which showed the Home First. The 3 aims of Operation Home First are about maintaining people at home, about early help and supported discharge, and also about getting people, if they do need hospital services, getting them out quickly. And then there was a cross-reference about where that all sits against our strategic objectives, against our programme of transformation, and against our medium-term financial planning. So I suppose the key bits about that reflects Operation Home First, regardless of whether it's ADP stuff, regardless in transformation in there. Those fundamental aims are about, they really do sit with our overarching strategic objectives about connections, communities, and our programme of transformation. So I think that it is an overarching, everything heads towards that. There isn't much, I think even if we look at programmes, and you mentioned drug and alcohol, so if we're to even consider the reports that come forward, it's very much about outreach, it's very much how we support people in communities, about maintaining people where they are, about picking them up. So although Operation Home First has initially been what is about our 6 areas of strategic ambition, the overarching aims do sit there. So I think it's probably just used as an umbrella. This case is just probably used as an umbrella term that helps encompass that, as rather than listing everything. I'm not sure if that helps, Luann.
Yeah, absolutely. That's helpful, Sandra. So it's just the umbrella term for all these initiatives that have got the same overarching strategic ambitions. That's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Maybe come in here just to kind of follow up, John, if that's okay. But
sure.
If you felt that there was an area where you wanted more information, then at the end of the agenda, there's always an opportunity to request that and for a report to come back. So if there was an area that you felt was being missed and that you needed more assurance on, I think the chair's been quite, is quite open to hearing from that at the end of the agenda, which gives you an additional piece of assurance around about that.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex.
Okay, I don't see any other indications on the report. So if we go to the recommendation on page 83, we're asked to note the contents of that appendix, So we'll be noting that there are 1 or 2 adjustments that will be made within it. So with those adjustments, are we happy to approve the content? Yep. Okay, thank you. And then the second recommendation is instructing the Chief Finance Officer to report annually at the start of each financial year. And certainly the intent of doing it at that time of the year helps us see what's been done and then see the plan ahead. so that then as we go through the committees, we're assured we're covering the full range of duties. So everything else being equal, that timing will be good. So we're happy to approve that recommendation as well. Okay, so thanks for getting us to this stage with it, Alex. That's really helpful for us as a committee, I think. Thank you. If we can go on to the next item, which is the internal audit annual report for 1920, and I introduced Colin earlier, and now he can take over and introduce the report to us.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Yes, here we present our internal audit annual report for 2019-20, a little bit delayed, but we've all had other things to do, unfortunately. It sets out our work progressed and completed during the year, confirms our organisational independence, notes that there has been no limitation on the scope of our work, and sets out the progress made by management in implementing agreed actions, the majority of which have been implemented, but there's a small number that have been subject to delays as set out in the appendix. The last two in that appendix have been closed off as a result of your meeting today. The papers on the agenda have already been presented by Martin and Alex. The report also includes Internal Audit's annual opinion, which is that reasonable assurance can be placed upon the adequacy and effectiveness of the board's framework of governance, risk management and control. So we're happy with the way things are looking at the moment, and hopefully you are too. If you have any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them.
Thank you, Colin. Questions and comments on the report? Okay, I'm not. Oh, Councillor Al-Samurai, please.
Thanks, Chair. I wondered if I could talk about the comment on page 110, please, about the asset management strategy. I wondered if I could possibly get some comment about whether or not there was any concern, but the fact that we haven't managed to prepare one, and obviously it's been an outstanding recommendation since June 2018, and if Mr. Stephen could possibly give me some assurances that he's confident that it can be completed by October 2020.
Alex, do you want to come in?
Sorry, I could come in on that. Could you just repeat that, Councillor Samurai? Sorry, about the page number, just so I can.
Sorry, I'll deal with it. So I was having a bit of technical difficulties there. Sorry, I couldn't get off of mute. So yeah, I'll have a look at that. So in terms of that, this recommendation has been outstanding for some time. Last year that we had a change in the structure around about the team that was supporting and undertaking that work, and what became clear at that point in time was that there was a bigger priority for that team to actually focus on projects within the primary care setting where we actually had an opportunity to get cash into the city and to develop our primary care estate. So we deliberately prioritised that team in relation to that. And pulled them away from other work because of the deadlines associated with that, and potentially allowing us to get new buildings in the city. And again, I think what we're now doing is actually having a look at what that plan really needs to look like and what we need as assets within the IJB, thinking about the assets that our partners have, and we continue to use them. But in relation to the social care side of things, some of the things that the IJB's seen over the last wee while is where we've actually been looking at providers building the buildings and basically recharging us for some of the costs as well. So I think we've got a better idea of what that strategy looks like. There's also differences or changes that have to be made as a result of COVID. Particularly around the primary care setting, and what does your GP practice look like as a result of COVID, and how do you access your GPs and where they're going to be based and what sort of services are they going. So it's a work in progress, but we have got what my focus on this really is, in the area which is likely to change would be around about primary care. And we've got a report coming back to the IJB in October about primary care 2C service redesign, and then that will give us an opportunity to develop that plan and to bring that back. So yeah, the plan is you know there, but we just need to kind of firm up on that based on some of the decisions that are likely to happen.
Thank you, Alex. Sandra, your hand's still up. Did you want to come back in?
Yeah, thank you. Just to really build on that, I think we would have. I would suggest we would have difficulties in giving you a cohesive and comprehensive plan by the end of 2020, and the rationale for that is just building on what Alex said. COVID has meant that we're rethinking how we deliver it on right across our estate. For example, on our daycare, our respite, what our community buildings look like. We're the IJB in October. There is papers coming on daycare and respite. There's papers coming on the 2C practices. We've also had how that will all impact the COVID hubs, what that's looking like. That we're in such a period of significant change that even I think if that structure had been written, it would be needing rewritten now. So I wonder if it's possible for us to, I do appreciate the fact that that's got a 2018 deadline on it, and we probably do need to, is there any way of us agreeing a more workable timeline for that, with us to answer Councillor Samurai's issue, which is rightly so, that we should get that addressed, but also really mindful of everything that's going on at the moment, is that we're in a bit of a moving feast and still designing and developing services. So to make sure that we have that, and as Alex says rightly, the whole contract that went live in March, which is a contract that we have with Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen City on complex care, that's absolutely designed about helping to get our out of area placements back in, because we don't have facilities within the city, but it's again not looking at the assets that we have, but other assets, really mindful of that. So there is a huge amount of work going on, and absolutely agree that we've not got it written down, and we should have, we do in different bits, but not collectively. So I'm wondering if there's a more robust time frame we can put in place to allow us to come back and work towards that, but giving you something that is a bit more cohesive and taking on board all the learning that we've got in COVID.
Okay, so we've heard the suggestion from the Chief Officer. Are there comments on that, Councillor Samurai?
I wondered if I could have some comment from the internal auditor about this discussion, just to see what his thoughts are on that.
Okay, thank you. Colin?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I absolutely agree. The action was to develop an asset management strategy, and I think what that looks like and what it's going to be is entirely up to the officers. My suggestion would be that you set that out in terms of a timeline for developing it, rather than trying to get it all right now, because as you say, things are changing. Things have been changing since we made the recommendation in the first instance, and that's why it's never been settled upon up to this point, I should think. Obviously, we're in a period of even bigger, more drastic change as we build back better for the future. So I would close this off if I knew that you had a plan in place to bring that forward. I suspect it's not something that we can just say, you have concluded this and this is the end of the line. Asset management is good, and what you do with your buildings and properties and who's in them and what they do is all part of the transformation agenda. I don't want this hanging over your head forever, but it needs to be addressed. So I think that that's a very sensible suggestion from Sandra there, that we kind of we take a step back and look at this and go, well, what are the plans for going forward, rather than going, right, this is our written document that says exactly what we're going to do with all of our resources. I don't think I ever expected that as part of this action. It is just the overarching strategy. How will we develop that, and what are the different stages that you'll go through in assessing that?
Thank you, Colin. And that I'll open it up again, but that fits with the overdue recommendation to develop an asset management strategy. The assumption being that you reach a conclusion, but if it needs a process, you're saying that needs to be mapped out. And if that was to come back to say, the next committee with what the process is, then at least we would have a timeline and we would be able to track that as a committee and have the governance from that, and then the audit recommendation would be fulfilled at that point. But Councillor Al-Samarrai, do you want to explore that further?
I'm happy with that proposal, that something comes back so that we can agree a timeline to get this recommendation signed off. You know, I accept that this is a moving feast, if you like, and I am content that we have some sort of proposals that we can flesh out, even if we do it on a sort of milestone basis and look at the assets not in their entirety, but perhaps over a period of time. As long as we've got a timeline for this coming forward, I'm satisfied to leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Sandra, does that work in terms of, say, the next committee, or when would you be able to come back with a timeline, either Sandra or Alex?
So really conscious we've got the couple of big decisions that the IGB will be asked to make in the October. So I'm not sure where that sits with the committee, but I think depending on the decisions that will impact and feed into some of this. So the next committee is due in when?
September.
September. I would ask it was the one after that. I think that'll be too soon because we'll not be working on, you won't have made a decision yet on a couple of the key items.
Okay, so we would be looking at the November committee.
I think at the earliest, yeah, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Okay, and Alex, are you content with that?
Yeah, I'm happy to bring back a timeline in a process, and I think you know, we've already got somebody working on something around about this anyway, so we should be able to, you know, pull that together.
Okay, thank you. Luann?
Thanks, John. That sounds entirely sensible, what's been agreed. My question was just how digital feeds into this, and would that, you know, is that because the two go hand in hand, and would we be looking at two separate plans around, one about buildings and one about digital, or would they be coming together under one plan?
I think
Sorry, I was just going to say that our digital infrastructure is part of our plan, and I think that's what's impacting on our building base. There would definitely be reference to and consideration of our digital infrastructure within that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Luann. Any other questions and comments? Okay, just before we go to the recommendations then, if we can just, that was page 110, and on that item, if we just to record this, so at page 111, the directions progress has been covered, so we know what the next step is in terms of the next committee hearing on that. And then page 112, this is where I made reference to the risk management policy earlier in the on the agenda. So the recommendation here was to consider whether it needed a separate policy, and our decision is that the policy is as it sits in the existing framework as opposed to anything separate. So just confirming that. Okay, and then the regular exercises, we've got the October workshop that will be coming forward on that. So is everybody happy that we go to the recommendations now? So the recommendations for this are on page 99. I'm just going to get there. So we are asked to note the internal audit annual report for 1920. We're asked to note that the Chief Internal Auditor has confirmed the organisational independence of internal audit, and note that there's been no limitation to the scope of the audit work in 1920. And then the final recommendation, note the progress that management has made with implementing the recommendations, and the adjustment in Sandra's suggestion there has been taken up, and we'll be looking to an update on that at the November committee. So with those recommendations, are we happy to to approve those. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Colin. We look forward to working with you going ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
The strategic plan dashboard is the next item, page 113 of the pack. Grace, are you here to speak to this? I think Alison is on holiday.
I am. I'll try and introduce it as just as gracefully as Alison would. So
go for it.
So you have before you the progress report on our strategic plan dashboard. It's a good time to update you on the progress, because we also have the annual report coming to the IJB in September. In the annual report, will give you kind of a wider overview and a better picture of what the dashboard is actually telling us. There's been significant development on the dashboard, and one of our priorities has been supporting what we have as national measures and making sure that we have the local data in underneath that. What we use it for at the moment is it goes regularly to the Chief Officer's performance meetings, and it is circulated around the leadership team regularly. One of our aspirations is to make sure that everybody has access to it, and I think a few of our NHS colleagues have maybe got access to it now. We are working on getting some of our ACC colleagues on, but there has been a bit of an issue getting that done, but hopefully we can get that resolved quite quickly. One of the benefits, although there hasn't been many from a pandemic period, but one of the benefits we have seen from this time is that there has been a shift in priority for data. So it's making my job a little bit easier. But it's also saw the performance management and evaluation group working on different aspects on performance as well, especially around our public protection and social care measures that we've been feeding the Care for People group. We're also now developing a data support group for our huddles for Operation Home First. And I think as we move forward, we will have to consider what measures that is coming from Operation Home First and make sure that these are feeding into the strategic plan dashboard as well. So our proposal is to take that ideas and that changes to the November Risk Audit and Performance Committee. If there's any other questions or on the dashboard, I'll hopefully be able to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Can I open that up for comments and questions? Okay, Councillor Samurai.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a very small thing, but I found the graphs on pages 120 and 121 quite illegible. Even if I increased the font to over 100, I still couldn't read them very well. I don't know if it's the format that we're receiving them on the PDF. I just wondered if we could possibly look at that, because it's obviously difficult to look at the data, although you've broken some of it down in the body of the report. I just wondered in future if we could have a look at anything like that.
Grace, do you have any comment on that?
Yes, I know, I understand. It's sometimes when we're pulling it off into PDF, the writing is going to be a bit small there. If I could, maybe what I could do is I could PDF it better in a larger format and get it sent round. And if anybody else has any questions on the detail, I can try and find that information out from you from the specific teams. Would that be helpful?
I think that would be useful. Councillor Samurai, would that be helpful?
Yes, please, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I think just in the meantime, until we can all get access to the actual system, because once that's done, I think it'll really prove its weight. So that, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. Very good question. 3.17, which is on page 116 of the pack. So this is social care unmet need, and the report says that it's decreased over the COVID-19 period. But I was really just wanting to get a little more clarification, because the report, this paragraph says that it is felt that the care has decreased more as a result of families picking up care during lockdown. So is that so? Presumably that means that because families are all, they've not had much to do. They've actually been doing the care for, that would normally be picked up by carers. So they would normally be out to work, but because they've been there, they have been doing that. That presumably is what that paragraph means, isn't it?
I'll let Sandra update on that one, I think.
Okay, hi, Councillor Bell. Yeah, initially that was some of the reason that the unmet need was definitely, we seen a decrease in people's needs because families were, during lockdown, able to unfurloughed and people were very reluctant for sending family members into hospital. You'll recall about all that closed down. So that did impact it there. But what is interesting is we're going forward with our modelling data, which is still very, very early, is that the reduction in elective surgery as well. So that's the other thing we'll need to be mindful. So elective care for our older client, that's often an area where we had increased needs and increased demands. So cardiology, ophthalmology, things like this, as their elective surgeries were coming through, there was a heavier increase there. So we've not had those elective surgeries coming through either. So there has been a reduction in that. So we're very mindful of how that starts to step up and how that looks. But it is, I think there's a combination of more than a few factors, and some of the other parts is that we've had staff on, it's a balance within our care at home providers, for example. Some of their staff would have been in lockdown, some of their staff would have been on furlough. So it's quite a positive that our unmet need has dropped and our care needs have met. So, but we're very mindful as that starts to ramp up, and are keeping a very close eye on the data, and that's our new care at home contract, how that's progressing, the new frailty pathway, how that's progressing. All those things are really designed around us getting into a place of being able to respond as this starts to step back up.
So thank you. That was actually that was helpful. So do you think though this fall off in elective care is almost a bit like a tsunami that's just going to overwhelm us, or I mean, how do you propose to manage that? How will you manage that?
So the mobilisation plans as they're starting from, my understanding is the mobilisation plans as they're starting through NHS Grampian will indicate that there will be electives. So normally what would happen in winter planning, if you like, if there was a surge of winter, there would be winter wards and elective surgery would be stepped down. That's not the case this year with the waiting list and things. There is a plan that we are maintaining our green and amber pathways, so that elective surgery can be maintained. But one of the things that we've learned, particularly as Grace says, as we're really digging into the data and into the modelling about what causes it, having an understanding that our elective care does impact on our social care, so our care at home and things like that. There's a new document out just this week, which is a real focus on prehabilitation. So really getting people fit for surgery before they need that. So I think that's something we'll be working with acute to say, what are we doing? What is acute doing to prepare people pre-surgery to make sure they're in their fittest so that they don't obviously default. So again, it's multifaceted, but I don't think it'll be a tsunami because of the reduction in the actual capacity of ARI. If you think about the changes they're having to make to how theatres respond, they've got a reduction in that, a reduction in bed base, so they're not going to be able to get up to the pre-COVID measures anyway. But because of PPE, infection prevention control, but it will be starting to be up. And I think because we're planning now on aiming to be living with COVID and living with surge, we should be ahead of that. But as much as what we can plan, we are planning for that. We're very, very mindful of it. And I think there's more ways than just increasing care. It is about understanding, why does elective care have a higher, if we've got an older population that's going in and having elective surgery and a high proportion of them are coming, a proportion of them, and not high, a proportion of them are coming out needing health and social care. We need to be digging into that and really trying to understand that and being a bit preventative rather than just saying we need more home care. So I think this period of time has allowed us to really take some real steps back, pause and look at the data and understand what we need to do against that. Sorry, I'm digressed there slightly.
No, thank you. No, that was actually quite interesting.
Okay, thank you. Luann?
Thanks. really good to see the dashboard again and to see more metrics now in it and the job and updating. So thank you for that. It's really good to see. And my question is just about the overall. So we've got 66 metrics now, and I'm just wondering. I'm keen that we obviously, from a governance point of view, we want to avoid a sort of scattergun approach where we just take random. What about this risk or what about that? Do we need to? I'm wondering, maybe John, it's a question for yourself. Is there something about dividing this up really clearly with clinical care governance and make sure that all the areas are being covered, and maybe we agree? I'm thinking of what happened a few years ago with the transformation projects, where we agreed to take a deep dive into an area per meeting or something like that, because it's really good data, but I think we need to have a plan for making sure that we're focusing on the right risks and the ones that we need to consider, and it's quite hard to do that when there's 66 of them. So it's a question, and I don't quite have, I don't know what the best answer to that is, but it's just something about thinking it through and making sure we have good oversight and focus on the significant risks.
Okay, thanks, man. Yeah, I'll come in with a comment in a minute, but first of all, Grace or any of the officers want to comment.
Yeah, Luann, I think that's a good point, and I think John had raised it before pre-agenda as well, that it would be useful to have some of the SP dashboard has gone from the start of where our strategic plan was, but actually have a look at the back trend data and that, and then that would kind of give us an overview on some of the aims. Maybe if you took a deep dive on one of the aims specifically. But yes, I think going forward, I think going into the November proposals and what we're doing from the Operation Home First will all kind of feed into that, and hopefully we'll be able to narrow down some of the points that you want to look at closer.
Thanks.
Thank you, Grace. Yeah. Yeah, in terms of my comment, I think it would be, we're going to be seeing what Operation Home First means for this and whether there's additions or reshaping of it, which would be helpful. I think in relation to that, there'll also be a reflection, as I understand it, on the strategic aims, and this is, Operation Home First brings in the transformation, so the different strands are coming together. That for me, there's two levels of this, and I think this committee would still want to look at the overall picture, so it's the overview, and may want to do some deep dives, and certainly clinical care governance going into some deep dives would be really helpful as well in terms of the process. It's almost at two levels, and I think also as a committee we're still just getting our head around some of this to understand the significance of the different indicators, and how they impact on the strategic aims that we have. So that's probably a work in progress for us to get there, and because in some ways it's good to have the data at that level, but there's an awful lot of it, and so being able to filter out and see what's critical, and get the reporting on the basis of exceptions, so that once we're familiar with this, we will just need those exceptions to know what is actually improving, what's an area of concern. And I guess we're a little bit away from that. So, but I do think getting access to the dashboard, being able to read that clearly, is a key step in that. So Councillor Al Samurai is absolutely right. When you get this and it's difficult to see it all, it just puts off that stage of getting a good grip of it. So I do see it as being, we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. Maybe that's, yeah, okay. Gracie, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the priorities, I think, was to try and get everybody access that they need it. And feel free to please email me if you have it, especially our NHS colleagues. If you haven't got access already, then I'll make sure that that's an easier process. I can get that done a bit quicker. And I really want to make sure that I've got everybody on my list for the ACC level access as well. It does take a wee bit longer because you've got to get an NHS log on and such like. But yeah, please feel free to email me and we can try and get some access done better, quicker.
Okay. I think I've got Councillor Bell and then Luann.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I'm just looking at the graphs, and prevention is obviously much better than cure. So I'm looking on the prevention bit now under immunisation. I'm wondering if they're right. So there's one graph that shows immunisation update at 12 months, 6 in 1, and between 2019 quarter 4 and 2020 quarter 1, it's up 3%. But if you then look at the immunisation update rate at 24 months, 6 in 1, between 2019 quarter 4 and 2020 quarter 1, it's down 3%. You see that?
Okay, I'm not sure which graph you're looking at there.
Okay, so
I think I do. I think I do see you from there, but I think what it is the measurement. Let me just double check to make sure that I'm getting this right. That so it's the bottom graph on page 121. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I've zoomed in such a lot to see this. So the bottom graph in the middle is immunisation uptake at 24 months, 6 in 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you go up one graph and to the left, you'll see it says immunisation uptake rate at 12 months, 6 in 1. You've got those two.
Yeah, so the 6 in 1 has for up to 12 months is increased.
Yes, between 2019 quarter 4, 2020 quarter 1.
And then they get another immunisation before 24 months, and unfortunately that's decreased. So yeah, our measures for 12 or up to 12 months have increased overall, but yes, our immunisations for up to 24 months is decreased over the last quarter.
Right. So what's the difference then between uptake rate at 12 months, 6 in 1, and uptake rate at 24 months, 6 in 1 over the same period between 2019 quarter 4 and 2020 quarter 1?
I was reading it as the age of the child, but
yeah, it is. Yeah, age of the child. So yeah, so if you're
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Right. Wow, how stupid I am. Thank you.
That's the point of these
laugh.
things.
That's it, exactly.
That's the point of these things, to understand them. So that's fine. Good.
Thanks.
Good question. So Luann.
Yeah, it was just a quick point really on the idea of moving to exceptions reporting, which I think it will be a good way of filtering the areas of risk. But I do really think it's important we would look at our successes as well, so we're just not completely focusing on the areas where there's challenge or we're struggling, because I think we need to see the positives too, and it's important we recognise where really good progress has been made. So that was all, just to make sure that we're not totally focusing our committee business on where there's challenge, because we need to have the balance of all the good stuff too.
Okay, no, it's a good point, and yeah, we need to keep mindful of that. And sometimes, if you exceed target, it's because we're spending too much money, too much resource on something that could be spent on something else. So there's different ways of looking at the variance, if you like. Okay. Okay, I don't see any other indications on this. So if we can go to page 113, which is for the recommendation. Just getting that, if you bear with me, please. So we're asked to note the progress made against the strategic plan to date, and note the further development work on performance indicators, particularly to demonstrate delivery on Operation Home First. So are we content with those recommendations and to approve those? Okay, yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Grace, for stepping in on that report. Thank you.
Thank you.
If we can go on to item 10, which is the commissioning plan, and this, I think, is it Jean that's here for this?
Yes, it's me. The report was written by Anne Mackenzie and myself. Anne's on leave this week, so so you've got me. Hope that's okay.
Thank you, Jean. Well, if you'd like to introduce the report.
Certainly, thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. This is a report to update you on progress against the Strategic Commissioning Plan and how it aligns with the Contracts Register. So in November 2019, the Strategic Commissioning Plan and the associated Annual Procurement Plan were presented to the IJB. And following on from that, the Strategic Commissioning Board was set up, and with the purpose of overseeing commissioning and procurement activity. And since then, also there have been a number of supplementary procurement plans that have been presented to the IJB as and when required. So obviously in March this year, when COVID arrived, that had an implication for how we implement the strategic commissioning plans and on procurement activity. And we've worked in accordance with Scottish Government guidance and COSLA guidance, national principles on supplier sustainability, and inevitably all that had an impact on the plans. So perhaps the most significant impact was on the tenders for care at home and supported living that were live at that time. What we did in relation to that was we extended the submission date for suppliers who obviously were spending more of their time and effort having to concentrate on actually delivering services in that very kind of challenging initial period of COVID. And we also reduced the complexity of the requirements. So that process was extended, like I say, but has now been concluded and contracts have been awarded, and we're just at the kind of implementation stage of that. It does say in the report that you would be given a verbal update. At the time the report was written, the contract award was still in the standstill period. But since then, obviously, that's been concluded, and I can tell you that supported living framework has been awarded to 24 providers on that framework, and that will be effective from the 1st of September. The care at home contracts, 3 locality contracts have been awarded, and all of those have been awarded to a consortium of existing providers. They're going to be forming a new legal entity called that's going to be known as Granite Care Consortium, and that will be effective from the 1st of November. There is an implementation group that has been set up to oversee the implementation of that. It's quite a complex process, so there's a whole group being established to look at implementing that. So that was the most significant piece of procurement that we've done. The report also lists other significant commissioning procurement activity grant awards and a number of services that are to be reviewed before the end of the financial year. So just in summary, I think it's particularly because of COVID, it has been very challenging, but I think that we are still broadly in line with the strategic commissioning plans and the approved procurement plans. Happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you then, Jean. Questions and comments? Okay, I don't see anybody indicating. Certainly, I found it to be a very concise report and so very helpful, giving us a full picture, although it's good and concise. I'm wondering if the 24 providers then, is that 24 individual providers and different contracts?
Yes, the way a framework agreement works is that all those providers will be admitted to the framework, but they're not guaranteed any work. The individual contracts are made when a service is required for an individual or for a group of individuals in perhaps a core and cluster type service arrangement, and then the contracts are formed between the providers. Sometimes those contracts can be made by direct award, and sometimes there might be a mini competition to award to groups of groups of care packages, if you want to describe it that way, to providers.
Okay, thanks. And then the other one, because that's the more traditional framework approach that we've
Yes.
had, whereas the other one is now the consortium, and so that's slightly different now in terms of the consortium. If I'm using a non-technical term, divvying up work or rearranging work. And so I recall us being briefed on those arrangements. Yes. That's maybe an area where as board members we'll benefit from a refresh, if you like, around that, and then how that works out in due course against the intent in terms of changing to that. So that would be useful. It's good to see the progress that's been made and bringing that to this stage. That's really helpful. Luann.
Thank you. Yeah, really helpful report. It was just a question on, you mentioned about the guidance from national bodies about advising partnerships to not progress with procurement. Do we know how long that guidance, is that still valid at the moment, or has that been lifted since we're out of lockdown, or just what the timelines are for changing that?
The guidance is still in force. There's a number of different pieces of guidance, and I'm not aware that overarching guidance has been changed yet or lifted. I think partnerships are reviewing on an individual basis whether it would be the appropriate thing to progress with a tender or not. So I think it's starting to kind of lift itself. It was never a directive that we should not carry out any procurements. It was always, you should consider what's the best thing to do. So I think that, you know, it's kind of moving in that respect. The other bits of guidance are around supplier sustainability. So it's about things like managing a process to approve additional costs that providers have had, making sure that we put proper arrangements in place to try and support providers to remain sustainable during these challenging times. And those that kind of guidance and those national principles are being adjusted and amended as we kind of move out of the main pandemic phase.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Any other comments? I've just got one quick question, and that's I think it's on page 136, and so it was interesting to see the progress here, and we're talking about the market intelligence line, and year 2021, the market position statement for the duration of the current strategic plan being published. Is that in progress, or has that been delayed?
Sorry, I'm just scrolling to page 136.
Top of that.
Yeah. I have to confess that I'm not entirely sure. Anne would be best placed to answer that one. So I can find out from Anne what the intention is there. That's and get that information back to you.
Okay, just drop me a line for that. That would be good.
John, it's Alec here. Just to say that is on the IJB business planner, the market position statement. So. So that will be picked up at the next meeting, but I haven't got the date off the top of my head, but there is certainly a date that's on the business planner. I think it's been pushed back.
Okay.
At least December, but it is definitely on the business planner.
Okay, I'll go and take a look at that. Thanks very much. Yeah. Okay, so thanks for the report and the update. So if we go to the recommendation for this, which is on page 129, we're asked to note the progress that's been made against the plan. We're all content with that.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so this takes us to the final item, item 11. And at this point, it's for me to ask members if you've received sufficient assurance or if there's any additional assurance that you would like to request for items that have been on the agenda or any other areas of business. Is there anything else, Philip? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm puzzling, and that's really for item 9, that dashboard. Remember, I did my daft laddie question. I couldn't understand this perfect correlation, and I've been puzzling it for the past 10 minutes. I think there's a problem there. So if you've got, just thinking about it, if you've got 12-month-old babies, children, having an increase in uptake of inoculation, and so over the same period you've got a corresponding decrease for 2-year-old children, and something's going on there, isn't it? So there's some messaging going on there that whereas 12-month-old mothers, 12-month-old babies perfect, 2-year-olds not perfect. So that was pre-COVID. So there is no, there's no reason for them to stay at home, as it were. It's bizarre.
So, do any of the officers want to comment on Alex?
Yeah, I'll come in. Councillor Bell, what I'll do is I'll ask Grace to pull together a wee briefing note on that, just to go through that, and we'll get the graphs put into a format that's easier to read. And also we will come back and we'll copy all the people who have attended this meeting into that response. The other point I would say in relation to immunisations is that there is a report going on immunisations to the next IJB, so there will be information within there as well to give members more assurance. But certainly we'll take on board the points that Councillor Bell's raised, and we'll come back.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry it takes my brain sort of 10 minutes or whatever to actually register something's not quite right, but yeah, thank you.
But I mean, you did preface that by saying, a daft question, but I think that's part of our job, is to see what's being presented to us and ask questions, and some of them will have simple answers and some of them might not. So I don't want to discourage people from trawling through these things.
Thanks. I know, Chair. I'm up for daft laddie questions. So don't get me wrong.
Yes. I might have to control the volume at some point, though. But yes. Okay. So can you just confirm then that you've received reasonable assurance in terms of us as a committee fulfilling our duties? Okay. Thank you very much. Well, that brings the meeting to a close. So I'd like to thank everybody for their contributions. Thank all the authors and the presenters for getting us back on track now, and look forward to our next meeting, which, Derek, can you just remind us the date in September?
Certainly, Chair. It's the 23rd of September and then followed by the 3rd of November.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that brings us to a conclusion today. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you at the next committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.